We good? You good? Okay. Good evening and welcome to our May 24th voting meeting of the Exeter Township School District Board of School Directors. Before we get started tonight, I would like to let everyone know that the board did meet in executive session to discuss personnel items on Friday, May 14th. If you would please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Mr. Fike, if you could do the roll call, please.
Allison Wilson.
Present.
Hunter Ahrens.
Present.
John Fiddler.
Here.
Here.
Dr. David Hemberger.
Here.
Michael Chapina.
Here.
Dr. Sharon McClendon.
Here.
Fury Miller.
Here.
Michelle Stratton.
Here.
All present.
Thank you. I just would like to say that the Exeter Township School District has recently updated its mask guidance for staff, and staff members continue to wear masks when interacting with students. And in respect of these procedures, I thank the board and administration for wearing masks this evening, as we have students in attendance with us helping us to record our meeting. Okay. Superintendent's report, Dr. Minor.
Thank you, Mrs. Wilson. As we approach the end of May, this is an extremely busy time of year in schools. We're, of course, winding down for our students, looking forward to senior awards night, to graduation, all of the wonderful things that the end of the year brings. We are also very busy planning for our Talons and Tips summer camp. We're pleased that a lot of community partners have been willing to engage with us in this, and we're really excited about what we'll have to offer our students. And then it's also the time of year when really administrators get very busy planning for the fall. So between preparing the budget, which Mr. Fike will go over this evening, to the extensive amount of personnel hiring that we need to do, which Dr. Holler has at least a portion of in tonight's agenda, it is a very, very busy time. The hiring, as in fact, will extend probably over multiple meetings so that the board is advised there are a number of positions to hire for. So very exciting time. We're looking forward to the next school year and having a great end to the current one. Thank you, Mrs. Wilson.
Thank you very much. Because the school board values and recognizes the importance of public opinion on educational issues, the board now invites any community or staff member to make public comment. In order to permit fair and orderly expression of public comment, please follow the following guidelines as outlined in our policy. Before beginning, please clearly state your name and address and then limit your comments to 4 minutes. All comments should be addressed to me as board president. Please do not address or question board members individually. Board members may choose to respond or clarify facts, but they are under no obligation to do so. In respect for your community and for our board members, I ask that you present your comments with decorum and with consideration of our dedication to serving this community.
Good evening, Ms. Wilson. Timothy Morgan, 4780 Farming Ridge Boulevard. I spoke at the last meeting, and I want to reemphasize again, as I've continued to talk to residents of district residents, the importance that I think that the board needs to consider in not allowing us to have a 1.9% tax increase. I think that if you look around, it's been a very difficult year for everybody, including the district, and I recognize that. Exeter Food Pantry, as you guys know, now that it's come here, has had an incredible increase in giving. Cost of bills is through the roof. Utilities are through the roof. Cost of goods is through the roof. We now have gasoline through the roof. Our residents are hurting, and I do not believe that at this time they can afford a tax increase. I speak on the people that I've spoken to and myself. I also talked about charter schools last time. I understand it's very difficult to plan a budget around what ifs. I still have a hard time believing that the $500,000 increase year over year for charter schools is going to continue next year. I do think some of those kids are going to come back, and I think we really need to work on figuring out who those kids are. Finally, the capital budget. I completely understand the need for repairs and to maintain our property. I do it in my own home. I would expect that the district would keep a safe environment for our kids, and so I appreciate it. The only thing I would ask is that we really do our homework as we're making these capital improvements, and projects that aren't imminent, if we do research and feel as though the cost of goods is going to go down sometime within our fiscal year, that we consider postponing those projects until such time as cost of goods is decreased, because we all know right now the increase that we're seeing, supply and demand and such. So I appreciate your consideration and your time tonight. Have a good night.
Thank you, Mr. Morgan.
My name is Lauren Fiorentino at 315 Owens Place. I'm a wife, mother, homeowner in the Exeter Township School District. I've been a patient in the state's medical marijuana program since it was adopted in 2016, and I also happen to be the administrator of the Pennsylvania Medical Cannabis Support Group. Our transition into this district will forever haunt me. Pandemic aside, my family did everything in our power to try to get through this hard year and try to have a good relationship with the district. We were met with pushback from the start, typecasted as potheads by the administrators at our district's transition meeting. You judged my daughter harshly by what she looked like on paper. We were judged as well, never even given a fair opportunity to share our family circumstances since I was silenced at our very first Exeter IEP last spring. When we finally started school, and my husband and I heard the Lorraine School Creed, we will strive to be the best that we can be. We will work together in this community. With respect to each other, we will follow every rule and show pride to ourselves and our Lorraine school. We looked at each other so torn. The school was perfect for our little family. We live our lives by the same moral standards every day, but still don't feel accepted by the community. Because of our choice to use natural plant-based medicine in the Pennsylvania Medical Marijuana Program. This program has allowed me a better quality of life. It's made me a better mom because I can function better, play with my daughter more, and take care of my family. My daughter has been a patient in the state's program for the last 3 years. She has made drastic improvements in all avenues. You all are closing doors I have opened time and time again. I'm tired, but I will not stop until this is made right. What kind of mother would I be if I left this for my daughter's generation to deal with? Right is right and wrong is wrong. I want a good reason, other than one that was based off of racism so long ago. I'm used to being treated like a criminal for using cannabis as medicine. Everyone is entitled for their opinion, but this medicine has been a miracle for my family. My 6-year-old little girl should not be treated like a criminal and pay the price. I beg you all to reconsider your standings in regards to this matter. My daughter deserves the right to receive her medicine safely on school grounds without disruption to her routine or anyone else's day. Thank you for your time.
Thank you for your comments.
Could I just ask, ma'am, that you would forward that email to the board, please? Thank you.
Well, Jerry Fiorentino, also 315 Owens Place. In the interest of not taking up too much more of your time, I have been in communication with various legal and legislative members. Unfortunately, with the timing of these meetings, this was the first opportunity we had to be present to discuss this. Trying to get in touch with anyone about it is impossible. The communication that we were given at the outset, I assume is the standing of the district as it is right now. I have a letter from our child prescribing physician in regards to this matter, as well as an email chain with the Department of Education that I'm glad we give to anybody so as you can peruse, or I can forward information as needed. But we don't understand, it's a safety issue. The fact that, you know, on days where I'm unable to, that my wife has to bring my autistic daughter off of school grounds in the middle of her day, causing a complete disruption, to then bring her back on the school grounds where it literally should not be anything longer than a bathroom break. It is not a disruption to any other students. We administer medication to our daughter orally. There is no vaporization, there is no smell, there is no nothing. Whatever stereotypes that the district members that we met with had in their heads, it's not okay. So I know you have a meeting to get back to. I don't want to take up any more of your time. Would you like this documentation?
It'd probably be better for you to email it to the district so we can forward it to the administration, because I don't want to have chain of custody. The administration is really the people that need to address your concerns, and I know that there's a lot of legal issues around this issue of medical marijuana use in schools and in the workplace and so on and so forth. So
I would be happy to receive
Yeah.
it on behalf of the district as a superintendent. If you would like to bring it up, you may.
Thank you.
Good evening. I'm Christine Winslow. I live at 313 Forest Hill Circle in Reading. My friend and I have some handouts that we would appreciate if we could pass to you and you pass around for the board. Thank you. I'm approaching you tonight as a parent. I have 2 children who went through Exeter schools. As a community member and as a retired Exeter Township teacher. I retired in 2018 after teaching 3rd grade, and I've also taught in Berks County in 2 other schools. I'm approaching you tonight with the issue of children wearing masks in school. I am also representing a group called Pennsylvania Parents Protecting Children, and you'll see that website and the name of that organization on the literature that's circulating. I will get to the point, which is the petition that I'm going to read to you today. If you'd like to follow along, it's the one with the blue arrow on the top. The other document you're receiving is a slightly lengthier version of this petition, and it includes references that the board and administrators will certainly want to look at after this meeting. They substantiate and document the statements that you'll hear from me and others tonight. They are very strongly research-based. They are not opinion. And so I will read the petition. Petition to end masking of students in Exeter Township School District. We, the undersigned, urgently request that Exeter Township School District immediately and fully revoke its policy that students must wear masks, also called face coverings or shields, in order to attend and or while attending school, while being transported to and from school, and while participating in any school events, including but not limited to concerts, sporting events, and clubs. We assert that, first, parents, adopted parents, and legal guardians have primary responsibility for the health and welfare of their children. Governments and school districts may not usurp this natural right. Requiring that students wear masks is a violation of civil liberties. Second, masks do little to nothing to protect children's health. Studies in medical literature support this statement. Moreover, very few children have contracted COVID-19 and nearly 0 have died from it. Number 3, masks harm children's health. Studies show that masks lower oxygen intake, which can lead to acute or chronic injury and can worsen underlying health conditions. Alarmingly, interfering with the breathing of a child is one indicator of child abuse. Fourth, children are in danger of social and emotional harm due to masking. Masks are a tool for social distancing, which medical literature clearly equates to social isolation, a human rights violation.
Ma'am, you have 1 minute remaining.
Thank you. Mask wearing is especially cruel to special education students and those with mental health challenges. Students' learning is curbed due to masks. Data is emerging to show learning loss, especially in speech and reading. For special education children or English language learners, masks can be a direct violation of least restrictive environment under the special education law. We, the citizens, urge this district to stop the policy of mandated masking. We look forward to seeing the smiling faces of our healthy children returning to school without masks. I believe that we as adults have cast our fear on the children. We are in a different position than we were a year or a year and a half ago. If you would please study the science, you will see that we have learned much about COVID, its transmission, and the safety of our children. I applaud you for doing great Herculean efforts this year to keep the children safe. I am a teacher myself, but I'm asking the board to take a second look. I will end with the 14th Amendment of our Constitution, which states, "No state shall make or enforce any law which shall abridge the privileges or immunities of citizens of the United States, nor shall any state deprive any person of life, liberty, or property without due process of the law, nor deny to any person within its jurisdiction the equal protection of the laws." That includes our children. Their freedom is not ours to take away. I urge the board to read this petition, to do some digging into the literature that supports it, not to summarily dismiss it. I know the attestation agreement that you signed with the state of PA is up May 31st. You can make this move June 1st. I thank you for hearing me this evening.
Thank you for your comments.
My name's Dan Talarico. I'm from 75 Spring Grove Court. I'm just playing off of what she said. First I want to thank you guys, for allowing us to be here. And now, I don't know if you've seen this. I know it was a local school district board found did update their health and safety policies to drop the mask requirements, like for outdoor sports, outdoor recess. If you guys could consider that, like at the end of this meeting, just for the last few weeks. I know you say, well, there's only a few weeks left of school, but there are there's sports and other activities that are going, through the summer, and into the summer months. And I think, if you're making, if you're making your son or daughter wear a mask while, playing a sport in 90 degrees in the heat and the humidity, it's dangerous. And it's not, you might say, well, they're not complaining. It's not dangerous for everyone, but you don't know how it's going to affect one student. And the last thing I want to say, I know that you had mentioned that form, it does expire on May 31st. Was that date correct, what she said? The form that you guys signed, okay. And guys, and the last thing I want to speak, because I've had people tell me, well, all these kids in mass, are fine, are getting used to wearing the mask. But I'm very concerned, their health, especially their mental health. Please consider it, guys. From that point, June 1st going forward, please consider what's been done to these kids. For 400 days, they've been told, that they can have breathing breaks. That they've been made to fear even their own friends and family for a virus that we know has zero risk, in between them, from being passed to them of getting seriously sick. They're not spreading it at large rates to adults and their teachers, even the schools that have opened up without masks. And I'm just asking you, at some point, if it could be done in early June, guys, it would be huge for the mental health of us and our students and all the kids. we went into the summer, you know, and you know that the parents had the choice on whether or not to mask their kids throughout the summer and going into the fall. You would be heroes to these kids and you'd be heroes to us. So I know you're going through a lot, but you know, the mental health right now has to be taken into consideration. And I mean, if it was my decision, it would end now. Now I understand your hands are tied until the 31st, you know, but just I ask you, you know, if you can please, when that date comes, if there's any kind of special meetings you can meet up, you know, I mean, if you want help from the community for suggestions. And yeah, I mean, that's pretty much it. I mean,
You have 1 minute remaining, sir.
yeah, the last thing I want to talk about, I have a son in 1st grade, and 3 months ago, he had a doctor's appointment. It was a medicine check, and he came out of the building, tore off his mask, stupid mask. 30 minutes later, he's in the Hershey Hospital because we could not calm him down. So I have a documented, I have a documented history of him throwing these fits, having these outbursts when he's wearing these masks. Now, like I complain sometimes because there are other people in his family who they make him wear a mask. I know they're doing the best job that they can, and they're scared too. But like this fear that's being projected on our kids, it needs to stop. You know, if we make the decision and move forward, then this will change heading into summer. Like I said, you guys could be heroes, and it'll start here and then it'll spread like a wildfire. I truly believe that. Thanks for your time.
Thank you. All right, we will move on then with our agenda. Our board meeting minutes. If there is no objection, we will adopt a motion to approve meeting minutes from last month's school board meetings, April 6, 2021 and April 20th, 2021. Hearing no objection, the board meeting minutes for April are approved. If there is no objection, we will adopt a motion to approve the April 2021 Treasurer's Report and payment requests dated April 21st, 2021 through May 24th, 2021. Hearing no objection, the Treasurer's Report and payment requests are approved. Moving on to our Education Committee, Dr. McClendon.
Thank you, Mrs. Wilson. So under A, we have the enrollment report for April 2021. Under B, it is recommended that the Board of School Directors approve the following Education Committee items. Items 1 through 6.
Is there a second? There's a motion and a second. Any discussion?
Can Dr. McClendon separate item 6 for vote, please?
Yes.
Yes, can you say the motion again, Dr. McClendon, and pull out number 6?
Okay, it's recommended that the Board of School Directors approve the following Education Committee items 1 through 5.
Second.
There's a motion and a second. Any discussion?
Yes, on number 4, I asked Ms. Harris if she's on to say a few words regarding number 4, the training on the Wilson reading system.
Okay, that's under number 6, Dr. McClendon, and we're only doing 1 through 5.
Okay, sorry.
That's okay.
All right, that way. Okay, right. That's number 4 under number 6. Okay, sorry.
That's okay.
Okay.
Okay. Is there any discussion on 1 through 5? Okay. All in favor say aye.
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 Any abstentions? Okay. Motion carries 9-0.
Okay. It is recommended the Board of School Directors approve the following Education Committee item number 6.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion?
So that's, I had to ask, is Mrs. Harris there?
I am.
Okay, all right. So I had to ask her if she could just say a few words regarding the fourth conference, training on the Wilson reading system.
Thank you, Dr. McClendon. So on the agenda, it looks like it's a one-day training for $12,000. It's not a one-day training. It's actually a year-long training in the Wilson reading system methodology. This is a methodology that's based off the Orton Gillingham method. I'm sure in the past here you've heard some conversation about this type of method being utilized for students who have significant reading needs and dyslexia. At this point in the county, most districts have a batch of teachers that are trained in either the Wilson reading system methodology or Orton Gillingham itself. About 10 years ago, I would say, the IU started offering the training here in Berks County, and at that point in time, most of the districts kind of capitalized on that and put through batches of teachers. You haven't done that here at Exeter, and the IU next year is going to be running a new training. They only have 20 spots available, so we had to get this item on the agenda with the initial training date so that we could reserve our spots for the year-long training next year. The year-long training is intensive. It involves them not only meeting as a cohort periodically with the trainer, but they actually each work with an individual student and work through the methodology with that student under the direction and the tutelage of the trainer. So it's more like a practicum in addition to just going and taking coursework and listening to a trainer talk to them about the program.
Mrs. Harris, isn't it true that we also often make agreements with outside people to do Wilson in the past?
That's why I think perhaps that terminology might be familiar to some of you if you've been on the board for a while, because you've been sort of contracting that out to Wilson tutors because you haven't had your own staff trained in Wilson reading. I believe right now we have one person at the elementary level, I think she's at Owatton Creek, who has this training, but that's it. I'm not sure if she got it through Exeter or if she already had it when she got here.
How many do we have trained in the Orton Gillingham program?
So just that one right now. Yep,
okay.
just that one. So we're planning on putting this batch of teachers through.
And how many teachers will go through this?
5 right now.
5 at this cost.
Yeah. And what we did was, it's not additional monies in our budget. We just reallocated monies that we already have in there that were allotted for different curriculums to prioritize this need because it hasn't been addressed in the past. And then there's actually a level 2 certification that comes after the level 1 certification. So it is, labor intensive in terms of getting it up and running. But once they have that training, there's not a ton of follow-up training that they need to continue to do year after year for that. I would just add that depending on the size of the district, having, I would say the districts I've worked in previously, about a half a dozen Wilson trainers throughout the district is pretty standard procedure to avoid having to hire tutors or have students placed outside of the district. So I think we're a little bit behind in the fact that we haven't done this previously. Yeah, we need to get caught up a little bit with this and get this group of people through.
Okay, any other discussion?
I have a question or two. What's the profile of student? How many students? What grades are we talking about? Or if you don't have a number, do you have a percentage of how many of our students will benefit from this?
I can give you a profile of a student who generally would benefit from this program. I actually had training in it, gosh, I'm going to say it was 25 years ago now, down at O.N.J. Roberts when I first started teaching down there. The programs have been around for a very long time. The Orton Gillingham method itself was first developed in the 1930s by Sam Orton and Anna Gillingham. So it's existed since then, but not utilized in public schools until around the 1980s. And that's when the Wilson reading program was developed as well. And so the programs were developed for the profile of a student who has
average to above average cognitive ability, so average to above average IQ, but has a very significant discrepancy in their decoding and encoding skills. So everything else in terms of their learning profile is average or above average, except that area of reading and spelling. That's what you commonly know as someone who is dyslexic. We call it, an IDEA disability category terms, we call that specific learning disability in reading. Now, not all students who have a specific learning disability in reading actually have dyslexia, so it's a smaller sub-portion of those students that we have identified with specific learning disability. But at any given point in time, when you're looking at bands of grade levels of students, you could typically have 4 or 5 students at each grade level who might need this level of intervention and service. Again, it depends just on the year and cohorts and, you know, kids coming through, but that's a pretty average band that you would get. We will be doing additional training with our secondary teachers because we have some students at the secondary level who would also really benefit from this type of programming. And there's a secondary portion of the programming that is tailored specifically to older students.
Just another question popped into my head. How accurately can we relate these kinds of problems to our low graduation rate?
I certainly think there's a lot of things that we can relate to our low graduation rate, but I think literacy, as Dr. Miner has identified, is definitely one of those things. This falls directly in line with her 100% literacy proficiency goals, and as you know, they relate directly to our graduation rate as well. Students who are low performers in terms of reading very often struggle in school overall. Obviously, there's frustration that comes with that. Obviously, that starts that cycle of perhaps maybe not attending school, being at risk, particularly as you get older into the secondary levels. So it's definitely a factor.
Okay. All in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries. Okay, Dr. McClendon.
Moving on to C, it is recommended that the Board of School Directors approve the flexible instructional day plan, and that document is attached. This item was added, it was not discussed at the May 3rd workshop meeting, so Dr. Flam is going to give you some additional information on this before we vote. Dr. Flam? Is Dr. Flam there?
Yes, he's here. He's
Okay,
turning on his
all
mic.
right.
He's good.
All right.
Thank you. The Pennsylvania Department of Education approved the use of flexible instructional days as an alternative form of instruction in place of a day otherwise canceled due to inclement weather or building emergency. PDE will count this as a full school day. They've done this for the past several years. This would be the 3rd year upcoming. BCIU advised districts to apply for flexible instructional days due to the uncertainty of our environment currently. And each district may apply for up to 5 flexible instructional days to be used each year, although there's no mandate to use those if you do apply. And it's certainly not our current intention to replace all snow days with flexible instructional days. We would notify parents and students of a flexible instructional day through our normal means, which is Parent Link, social media, and on our website. Procedures would be students in grades 4 through 12 would have their devices at home. They would log on to Schoology, receive their assignments via Schoology, and interact with their teachers via Schoology. Students kindergarten through 3rd would receive what we're referring to as an Eagle bag before leaving, and would have assignments assigned to them asynchronously via that Eagle bag. In terms of staff responsibility, teachers would certainly post assignments via Schoology or put them in the Eagle bag. They would make sure that the assignments in the Eagle bags are relevant by checking on a biweekly basis to make sure that the assignments align with what they're doing currently in class. They would be available for students throughout the day and be available for immediate response via office hours during certain periods of the day. Support staff would also be available to students throughout the day as well, counselors, specialists, and so forth. Student responsibilities on the flexible instructional day would be to log on to Schoology to get their assignments from their teachers or to access their Eagle bag assignments and to complete those assignments throughout the day. And to communicate with their teachers as necessary. They would also need to submit the assignments via Schoology on the day on the flexible instructional day or upon return to school when they do return. Student attendance would be reported by student completion of work. So if students were to complete their work, submit via Schoology or submit to teachers on their day of return, they would be marked present for the day. And of course, attendance is mandatory, so if students were not to do that, they would be marked absent for the day. And so there's certainly no mandate to use the flexible instructional days. However, it does provide, no pun intended, flexibility for the district. If we were to apply and be approved, then we would have the ability to use the flexible instructional days. If we didn't apply or were not approved, then obviously we would not be able to use those flexible instructional days. So I think it's just a matter of giving the district flexibility should we find ourselves in an emergency or out of school and wish to continue instruction on those days.
Okay, so you finished, Dr. Flan?
I am.
Okay, are there any questions for Flan?
I'd like to ask a question if I could, Dr. Flan.
Yes.
Do you anticipate that we might be using these days for your average type of snow days that we typically take off, or is this just more of a critical emergency situation?
Dr. Flam, I can answer that question. It can be used in any way, really, at the point that the district gets them approved. So there are some districts who have vowed to never have a snow day again, sort of thing. And as Dr. Flan mentioned, Dr. Hackman at the IU did encourage all 18 districts in the county to apply so that they had that flexibility if that were the case. We don't have the intention of never having a snow day here at Exeter again. That's certainly not the purpose, but you could theoretically do that. I think, more along the lines of if, there was, a once in a century blizzard on the way and, by the time we got to multiple days and we were extending the school year, you would run into the potential of going over June 30th, and then you technically have to go to school on Saturdays, those sorts of things. So without having that possibility, it really would tie our hands in that kind of an emergency. And I think after the pandemic, we're all more conscious of the fact of things that you don't expect to happen. So this is not implying any sort of policy change. It is simply giving the district the ability to count a day, even if students don't come to school due to a weather or other emergency. So there's no tie to the severity of it. It would really be my decision as superintendent to say this is either a regular snow day or a flexible instructional day. And again, we would be allowed to use up to 5 to reach our 180-day total required by the state.
Okay. And what would be the responsibility of the teacher in terms of, attendance? Would they be required to come to the school facility itself, or they work from home?
No, I mean, this is imagined as a day where it would be unsafe to come to school. Severe ice, severe snow, a hurricane, power was out, something along those lines. So typically it would be handled just like a snow day would be. The teachers would, be instructing from home, have that office hour from home. unless there was some mechanism to get them into school, like on a delay. Like teachers will report to the buildings at 3 o'clock, but the building is closed for students. So you can correct me if I'm wrong, Dr. Flam, but I don't think it imagines necessarily where the teacher's location would be. I think that would be, again, my ability to determine that based on the conditions in terms of the weather or other emergency.
And what about non-instructional staff?
It would be the same thing. So again, it would be handled on a case-by-case basis, just like we do now. So for instance, if we have non-instructional staff in the custodian and grounds crew who are coming into the building to remove snow, that sort of thing. So it really doesn't have any overall staffing implications in terms of how those days are used in the application itself. It would be, the way that I made the call in terms of who had to report for work, who didn't, how their days and time could be made up, et cetera, which is what we do now with the snow day. It's just that if you call a snow day, you will absolutely have to make up that day.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I've got a question. Eric, you said, I think that this has been going on for some years, several, 6, 5, something like that. Oh, second, okay. I knew it was more than one. Is there a database, or has someone done a report on the experience of using these across the state that we could refer to? Is it a success? Is it not a success? How did it go? A journal, whatever you want to call it. Has anyone assembled that kind of thing?
Not to my knowledge, Mr. Fiddler, but I would certainly be able to look into that. I can contact the IU to see if they have any information available.
Yeah, I mean, not for me, but it might help the district in deciding how and when to implement one of these days if we had a fact sheet or a Q&A or something like that to use.
Okay, Dr. McClendon read the motion, but we do need a second. Okay, any other discussion? All right, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
Any abstentions? Okay, motion carries.
Okay, under D, it is recommended that the Board of School Directors approve the Pearson Online and Blended Learning Program for K through 12, not to exceed $450,000, and funded through the ESSER grant.
Any discussion?
Yes, I have a question. Which round of the federal stimulus monies is this a part of?
We have left that open-ended, as it will depend on when we use it, but would be either ESSER 2 or ESSER 3.
Okay.
As we've spent ESSER 1. And so this has been discussed at length with the board in terms of making sure that we have a robust cyber option in the hopes that we don't lose additional students to cyber charter schools and potentially draw students back from cyber charter schools, et cetera. So this money we've discussed, it was, part of our original grant applications. However, now that the provider has been selected, I felt it was important to have a number on a paper that the board was aware of the potential. And that number is really kind of a shot in the dark as a multiplier of the per student cost, and where we think we could land with that. In the event that we would need to go above that, I would come back to the board for to make them aware of that. And certainly it's possible that we would go under that amount, but it could be because the ESSER grants extend through multiple years. It could come out of 2 or 3.
I don't have a substantial objection. I just want to emphasize the point I made 2 weeks ago, which is that we should have an accounting of what we're using all of those stimulus dollars for. I don't have a problem supporting this evening, but they all need to be brought together on one fact sheet so that we understand where those funds are going. And I know that we haven't had that yet for the summer learning program either. And those are really going to be important things to understand how we're spending this money.
So again, Mr. Ahrens, when we first started to receive the ESSER grants, you have to apply to the state, and so you have to put buckets. And so that application was shared with the board in terms of the broad buckets that the monies would be spent under. It's impossible to give the board a precise accounting of things like the cost of the summer program, the cost of these, until such time as we utilize them, right? So our best bet is to give you an estimation of the cost, but if fewer students come, let's say for the summer camp, we would need fewer supplies. If we have, more students who come out of cyber charter and into this cost might go up, but the cyber charter cost might go down. So we have the initial grant applications in ESSER 2 and ESSER 3. There's more specific guidance in terms of input and other things around those buckets. But certainly, at the conclusion of any given, the 8 weeks of the summer camp, for instance, it'd be very easy to turn that around and say this was the personnel costs, et cetera, and this is, where it took out of. So I believe that when they come out with the ESSER 2 and ESSER 3, I just was notified today that the ESSER 2 was opening, but that they hadn't put out all the guidance documents on there. I believe that there's specific accounting requirements that the district will have to fulfill, and of course, we would share those with the board.
I appreciate that. I think it's important to emphasize that this is an essential role of the board's governing responsibility, is to understand how we're spending funds. We're talking about millions of dollars here. So I want to make sure
No
that
doubt.
we have a firm understanding of how that's being spent in totality. Because right now we've seen different applications come across the desk, and I understand why we're doing that. There's a lot that's evolving quickly. We're still looking at guidance, different pieces like that. But it is important that we have the full picture of what we're using these funds for.
Again, Mr. Ahrens, if you have a specific question about any of the ESSER 1 funds and how they were utilized, we would be happy to produce that for you in detail. There's certainly, I hope that there's not an implication here that in some way we don't have an accurate accounting of how we've been using those funds. We certainly do have that, and 2 and 3 have not yet been released. The grants haven't even been opened to date, so in terms of our ability to apply. So there would be nothing that we could do other than to tell the board what our intention is to get ahead of it, and then when the grants actually open, we'll follow all of those procedures and make sure the board has the accounting of those.
What I'm looking for is things on a single piece of paper to say this is what we spent our money on, because this is, like I said, an extremely large amount of money. We approve the budget every year. We're doing a multi-million-dollar program, and I just want to make sure that I have a firm understanding of it, because I think that this is now, multiple meetings where we've talked about different amounts of money for different purposes, and a lot of it's off memory or what I have to go into the agenda and find. So I'm just looking for that very simplistic, this is the whole synopsis of the program that we use these funds for.
Again, I believe that you were provided with that for ESSER 1, but I can certainly resend it. ESSER 2 and 3 have not yet been opened. So at this point, we're simply making the board aware of our intention, because we have to prepare to utilize those funds in advance of getting them. Absolutely.
And can I just add, it's been my experience that anytime you work with federal funds, there is an enormous amount of reporting required for the disbursement of those funds. So is there some mechanism, Brian, as to how they're actually reported out? Because sometimes federal money is not even worth taking when you look at the reporting requirements.
I'm sorry. Actually, every quarter I have to file a report. ESSER 1 I'll be closing out June 30th, which is basically a report I file is what we spent against our budget. June 30th, when I close it out, I actually have to submit every single bill to match up what I've already reported to close that one out. But probably what you're looking for is a cash reconciliation. It's a one page saying budget, this is what you spent this quarter, this is what you spent year to date or grant to date. Now ESSER 2, actually we just got approval for that, but we haven't gotten a way to spend it yet, which will be next month. ESSER 3, they have not even opened up the application. They do guarantee us the funds, but until you put the application in and get that letter of approval, you can't start spending them yet. But we do have a letter of approval to start spending ESSER 2, and that's what we plan to use the summer school for. But if you want, I can get you that one page cash reconciliation that I get every time I file it. Get the same thing with Title 1, Title 2, Title 4, PCD grants each quarter.
I don't want to see the federal forms. I don't have a problem with you guys spending the money because I don't think you're doing it illegally. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm concerned about is there are a lot of districts all over the state that are using these for different purposes. I want to see why we're using it and how much we're using for the summer program, for the program to allow students to go online next year. Because that's a policy decision that the board needs to make. And, you know, my perspective is that we should have a firm accounting of what that whole program looks like.
Dr. Minor, I have a question about the implementation of this program. Is this cost associated with the utilization of the program for 1 year, or once we purchase it, are there no further costs associated with it in years beyond that?
No, the way that this works is this is, a provider of course content virtually. And the payment structure depends on how we utilize it. So for instance, if we had a student who we fully utilized their third-party providers, their teachers for, specialized classes for which we didn't have enough students to have an Exeter teacher teach them, there's a dollar cost with that. I think it's in the ballpark of $4,000+. If there are courses that we have multiple students and an Exeter teacher teaching it, but using their platform in terms of the delivery, then that cost goes down to $400. So I'm not sure that my numbers are exactly right, but Dan Wilczek and Joe Way have, the precise numbers. So in terms of how and when it will be utilized, it will be dependent on what students, how many courses they take, whether Exeter teachers participate in teaching them or it's entirely third party. And the pricing itself is for, a 1-year term, but certainly we could, if we had a highly successful program and we wanted to maintain it over a course of time, we could do that. And then courses, it's very difficult to predict right now how many students who are currently virtual would want to, pursue an Exeter virtual program, how many students who are currently in a cyber charter would want to come back to Exeter. So it really is dependent on the number of students, the number of courses, and whether or not we use a third-party provider to instruct them or not. So the money that we have allocated, the $450,000, was our best estimate on students who we thought potentially, through a survey that Mr. Wilczek sent out, and the multiplier at the most expensive price point, which is, fully instructed by the third-party provider. So again, we wanted to put it out to the board and say, this is the bucket that we're thinking of potentially using for this to make the board aware, but we would certainly have to, and certainly could, I believe by the start of the year, say this is the number of students who are fully enrolled, this is what we anticipate. But theoretically, if it was really successful, we have the ability to continue to use it and fund it through ESSER in future years, or to roll it into our own district budget and take let's say we were successful in moving students out of cyber charters, right? So we have, $1 million in cyber charter expenditures, and then reallocate those expenditures into paying for a program like this. So it's a very unpredictable time. I think one of the things that I'm struggling with, even with personnel, is how many students are going to enroll in Exeter's brick and mortar kindergarten next year, right? Did parents hold their kindergartners out because of COVID? And so we'll get the normal class plus additional students who didn't go. Do parents send their kindergartners to parochial schools and then they'll send it back? So, that's why we wanted to have a not to exceed number and say to the board, this is our best guess in this moment in time. If we go above this number in terms of the ESSER, we'll come back to you. But until we actually have students registered, all we can give you is our best guess because they're not firm.
Okay, but again, what I'm hearing is that it's likely that the money would be utilized for next school year primarily.
That's right. That's the intention right now. If we were going to use it in future years, we would come back to the board and let them know that.
And I guess one of the questions.
So we're not buying anything. Maybe that's what's confusing, Dr. Hamburger. This is more, I think, akin to a subscription, right? We're not buying something from them that we own. We're paying like a service fee to use their platform.
Right. No, I understand. No, I guess one of the things I always thought about the ESSER grants was that we were trying to avoid purchasing anything that would then, once the grant was not available, impose a burden on the school district budget in terms of ongoing cost over and beyond that year of allocation. So that's why it confuses me just a little bit. I didn't know whether it was something that we'll now have to
it's hard. It's certainly hard to say, right? So it absolutely has the potential, if we have a large number of students who want to do it, that we would develop our own courses in Schoology. We would have our own, even with this, potentially we could have a teacher. Let's say we had 30 10th graders who were taking Algebra 1 who wanted to do it virtually. We could potentially assign one of our Exeter teachers in their 5th period time slot to deliver that Algebra 1 curriculum via their platform, and it would be a much lower cost. So that's why it's hard to predict out to what the future would be. But in terms of not having to have the district absorb this cost in its ongoing budget, the ESSER grant gives us kind of like a head start, and then we have to really see where the numbers fall out long term, and then make it an internal plan in terms of more cost-effective ways to do that. If we have a substantial number of students who are interested in really pursuing virtual learning as a result of the pandemic long term, like they fell in love with the model, or are their families just concerned over the course of the next year in terms of however long the pandemic is still a concern. So I understand, I think, your point now, which is, are we going to have to absorb this, and are we going to fall off the fiscal cliff? And again, it's an unknown, but I think certainly as a team, we're very conscious of the fact that once we have an assessment of which students are in the program, monitoring the purpose, is it pandemic specific? Is it about the mechanism and the delivery method? And then where are we shifting funds within our existing budget? Because you're right, it's not something that we could sustain just adding $450,000 to our budget every year moving forward.
Okay, and then if the money's not fully utilized, can it be reallocated?
Yep, absolutely. And again, one of the things, and I'll ask Brian to check me on this, but the ESSER grants themselves, there's the term, and then there's actually, I think, an additional year that, what's the final accounting on 2 and 3 that has to be turned in?
2025.
So through 2025. So if they weren't expended, we could continue to use them.
And the one thing I want to add to that is this is actually trying to stop the bleed of the 20% increase in charter schools every year, and actually it's maybe, hopefully, see a decrease of going out, so it's actually saving us money, which instead of falling off the cliff, as you're saying, instead of sending it out, is stay in and cover itself or pay for itself.
No, I definitely support, the idea of strengthening our own virtual programs, but I just wanted some clarification in terms of what that cost represented.
And they, Dan will check, and Dr. Flam are going to be sharing at the Ed Committee on June 8th. The web page, that what they've put together, there's an open house, those sorts of things about the development and the iteration of this cyber programming for Exeter. So at that time, I'm sure they could give you even more detail than I'm able to provide right now about the specifics of how the funding around it works.
Thank you.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries.
Okay, and the final item for the Education Committee, E, it is recommended that the board of school directors.
We can't hear Dr. McClendon.
I took the mute off. You still can't hear me?
It's not loud. That's the problem.
Mr. Way's looking at a fix.
Can you hear me now?
We can hear you. Perhaps
You're very quiet.
Perhaps Mrs. Wilson could repeat what you said, or take your next item since it's so quiet.
Okay, do you want to, Mrs. Wilson, do you want to?
Oh, no, now we can hear you.
You're there now. We can hear you now. Go ahead.
Okay, yeah, I got a message from Joe that it wasn't on my end, but so he fixed it. Thank you, Joe. Okay, so under E, it is recommended that the Board of School Directors approve the following settlement agreements, items 1 and 2.
Second.
There is a motion and a second. Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries.
And that concludes the items under Education Committee. Thank you.
Thank you. Personnel Committee, Mr. Japina.
Thank you, Mrs. Wilson. Personnel Committee, it's recommended the Board of School Directors approves or ratifies the following consent agenda personnel items, numbers 1 through 9.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries.
It's recommended that the Board of School Directors approves the following termination.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries.
Recommend the Board of School Directors approve the following changes to administrative.
Second.
There's a motion and a second. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries.
It's recommended the Board of School Directors approves the creation of a groundskeeper / PA certified position per the attached job description.
Second.
There's a motion and a second. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries.
That concludes personnel.
Thank you, Mr. Japina. Moving on to Finance, Facilities, and Audit Committee, Mr. Aarons.
Thank you, Mrs. Wilson. I will pull all the budget items, but on the consent agenda, it is recommended that the Board of School Directors approve the following finance, facilities, and audit items. 1, 3, 4, and 5.
Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries.
It is recommended that the Board of School Directors approves the following finance, facilities, and audit item. Number 2, the 2021-2022 Capital Projects Fund budget in the amount of $3,620,000.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries.
Okay. I'm going to do C and D next, just to keep the budget together, and then I'll go back to the transportation vehicles. It is recommended that the Board of School Directors approves the final budget for the Food Service Department for the 2021-2022 school year with revenue of $1,763,307, expenditures of $1,761,758, and a net gain of $1,549.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
It is recommended that the Board of School Directors approves the proposed final general fund budget for the 2021-2022 school year.
Second.
There's a motion and a second. I think that Dr. Minor and Mr. Fike were going to make a little presentation.
Yes, we are. So, Mr. Way, if you have that, thank you. So the board was presented with our proposal for the preliminary general fund budget at a meeting in April. Mr. Fike has been working on that budget since, and we have taken the original presentation, and he and I are going to we've shortened the number of slides, but we're going to go through some of the most salient points as well as some changes to it since that original proposal. So this is a little complicated to talk into the microphone and look, but you could go to the next slide, please. So just a reminder in terms of the board last year, rightfully so, was very concerned about the potential impact of COVID-19 on the financial well-being of the Exeter community as a whole. And although we certainly have members of our community who have experienced a very negative personal financial impact, this is what the data on the collective whole of Exeter shows. The 2021 tax collections did not change from the previous year. There was only a 0.04% decrease in the earned income tax, and that the real estate transfer tax revenue is higher than it was in the pre-pandemic. Next slide, please. Oops, I think we skipped one. I'm going to give this one to Mr. Fike to talk through.
I'm sorry. I guess we should just really talk changes in the previous budget that was presented. 524, sorry. I showed using a use of assigned fund balance of $1,675,514. I'm now only asking to use $1,608,067. A net savings of using the fund balance of minus 67,000. We pretty well, what would I say, scrubbed the budget as far as we could. We actually saved the position, but gave better benefits in both dental and vision. Yeah, if we can flip the next slide. The one after that. One after that.
I don't know where you're going, but maybe don't go to that one. Can you go 3 slides? Go 3 slides back, Mr. Fike. Just hold off on that discussion until we get to that proper slide and just go through these.
So I'm still asking to use part of the fund balance to cover it. I'm still asking for a 1.9% real estate tax increase. The average school tax, $3,707. That would be an average increase for residents of $69.12 or $5.75 a month. Our assessed value stayed the same. We haven't seen any real change. There was almost $1 million from the previous year, but that was included in the budget I gave you before. One thing to note, which you'll have on next month's budget, the homestead farmstead is going down about $1.50 per person, and that's because the gaming revenues last year were down. I was glad to see they even had it, but the state actually moved money from one pot to the other so they could cover the homestead farmstead. If you want to go to the next slide. Our fund balance policy is between 5 and 8%. This will leave us a fund balance of 7.2%. And to put that in layman's term, that gives us 26 days of expenses. The state requires us to keep an unassigned fund balance of 8% or less. It's within that. Our policy says we have to be at least 5%. But 26 days is not much of a cushion. If the state would not pass their budget and we could not get out of real estate taxes, we would have no cash to be able to pay bills after 26 days. The nice thing about Exeter residents, the majority of residents pay their taxes as soon as they get the bills because they want that 2% discount. And so cash flow is not a problem for us in the summer, but a lot of districts it is a problem because they're, districts wait for the end of the period or pay during the regular period and not the discount. We've had very few people paying the late period last year, so that was even a better thing. I was surprised. If you want to move to the next slide.
Brian, just a quick question. What are the implications with the state if you don't meet their threshold for a fund balance? Do they put you in some sort of do you start on a path toward a receivership, or how does that work?
It won't be a receivership, but they'll first write you up that you're not following their policy. They'll start monitoring you. They'll what would I say? Put you on notice that they couldn't withhold state aid if you're not following their guidelines. I've not known them to do that. They've gone into receivership in places that constantly overspent, where they basically had no fund balance and they just kept on spending money they didn't have. If you go over that, they smack your hand, I guess you want to call it. But they're not going to penalize you, but they're going to embarrass you into going down to their, your school district will be in the paper for not following sound fiscal policy.
I think Mr. Lockinger could correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that there were some school districts that citizens brought a suit against for having excess fund balance. Was that in the news last year?
Lower Merion.
Lower Merion.
Yeah, it did occur. Yes, yeah. That's technically more. The state will ultimately their power is to withhold funds. Ultimately, they don't do that right off the bat, but ultimately that's
that's the sway they hold on you.
Right. Next slide.
I think this was the slide that you were referring to. So in this slide, when we presented to the board back in April, we had brought forward about $450,000 in cuts over the previous year. Two changes. One were, in that presentation, the ESSER funds were not shown as either a revenue or as an expense. Now they're shown on both sides. And one of the things that was brought forth by a board member at the previous meeting was to think about ways as an administrative team, and we certainly are extremely supportive of the board's desire to do this, that we could recognize the incredible efforts of our employees over the past year throughout the pandemic. And of course, we always want to let our employees know that they are valued. And so Mr. Fike was able, along with Dr. Holler, to renegotiate and restructure items within the personnel budget that allowed us to both provide improved dental and vision plans while bringing forth an additional $67,000 reduction to our prior proposal in April. So again, Mr. Fike mentioned that previously, that there's a $67,000 additional savings over the previous year that he is recommending that we utilize to have that structural deficit be even smaller.
Yeah, and I wanted to note that it's this is shown without ESSER funds. ESSER's, I'm estimating about 1.3 million to be spent, but it's also revenue coming in. I budgeted that in as budgetary reserve, so whatever we spend, we will get back from the government in reimbursement for that. So it's, I didn't want to show it with ESSER because you wanted to compare apples to apples to last year's budget. We didn't have ESSER in last year's budget. So.
Next slide, please. So one of the things, again, just to remind the board and the community about why Mr. Fike and I are recommending the tax increase. We have spent a number of years with a structural deficit in the district, and we have three levers really. We can reduce expenditures, which we've done at about $500,000. This is the first budget in Exeter history, recorded history, at least recent history, where we came in at a lower number than the prior year's actuals. And then a 1.9% tax increase, that's a lever to generate revenue. And then the use of the fund balance at that $1.6 million rate. That will then take the structural deficit from 2021 to 21-22 and cut it in half. And then we hope to be able to do something similar next year and ultimately get to a point where the district no longer runs a structural deficit year after year. So if you look at the next slide, this is ultimately at the point where we turn it over to the board and say, this is what we're recommending. This is the structural deficit change from over 3 million to 1.6. If the board, in fact, moves forward with the 1.9% tax increase, the board wants to have a lower tax increase. That would be a greater use of fund balance to achieve the same goal. If the board used a higher percentage of fund balance, it would result in fewer days of emergency operational experiences on hand, which ultimately is a risk to our financial health, and that structural deficit would be higher. So I think there's one more slide, Mr. Fike.
Excuse me, may I ask
Yes.
one more question? In this second scenario, use of fund balances, are there any implications to our bond ratings if we end up in a different sort of a financial scenario?
If you go down closer to 5%, the bondholders go look at it, and the future bond ratings might go down. We've been pretty, safe. We've actually set the part of the fund balance to be used for future deficits, which I'm using now. My concern, if we don't raise taxes and we keep on using it, you're going to get to a point of no return that you end up doing a 4% increase next year and a 4% increase the following year. But in the future years, because unemployment rate might have been higher, your index might go down to 3.5, and you're not going to be able to make it up. You know, if we were at a 3 million, I would be flipping out, because I think we'd be past the point of no return. You're going to have to cut services. And what I'm looking at is over a 3-year period, wiping out the structural deficit. And I think I sent out a glossary. I'll touch that up and get rid of my old school's names that I did it for. But the structural deficit's the gap between your revenue and your expenditures. And right now, our expenditures are here and the revenues are here. So we got to bring that gap together, that they're even, that we're not spending more than we're taking in. Okay.
If we just go to the last slide for 1 minute, please. And I just do want to remind again the board that one of our district goals is, in fact, looking at our financials and making sure that we're being fiscally responsible. However, we feel really strongly that the budget that we have brought forth also allows us to achieve those other really critical pieces. First and foremost, student achievement. And so we have really endeavored to not make any cuts. And in fact, I'm very pleased with some shifts that we've been able to make around personnel to get us closer to that goal. So if you go back to the previous slide for the benefit of the board and their consideration, Mr. Fike, before the board discusses this item, can you explain what exactly it is that they're voting to do tonight and what the next steps are in terms of the budget process?
Okay, right now you're voting basically to advertise a budget for the public to be able to see. You're approving a preliminary final budget. You do not adopt or approve the budget into the June meeting, but you have to allow it to be viewed on the state form, which I have here, which breaks out by objects and functions. For 20 days, it has to be available for public inspection. If you approve this tonight, tomorrow will be posted on our website, and also a copy at the front desk if anyone wants to look at it in person, or they can download it from the website. But that's what you're approving now. You're not approving the tax rate, but the budget's in the tax rate. That'll all be a voting meeting next month. And by law, you have to adopt the budget by June 30th. The state doesn't have to, but we have to.
Mr. Fike, I have a question for you. A few slides ago, down at the bottom, there was that $67,000 in savings that you had mentioned in salaries and benefits. Did you, that was different from the previous budget that you presented to us. Did you then take that $67,000 in savings to offset the structural deficit? That
what I did is use less of the assigned fund balance for future deficits.
Would that help us lower the tax increase a little bit if we did that differently? If we actually assigned it to, the tax increase pile to make whatever that number was, 876.
Can you go back one more slide? Oops, can you go back one more slide? There we go.
Yeah, this one. If we made 876,365 minus 67,000, would that help? What would that make our tax rate?
Give me a second here. An increase of 1.754 instead of 1.9, which the millage would be 34.1968 instead of 34.2458.
Okay. I would be interested in doing that for next year, rather than applying it to the.
Mr. Lockinger, if Mrs. Wilson wants to make an adjustment to the proposed final, is there some wording that she would use to do that?
All right. Other than, we're going to have to I'm just trying to see where your numbers are here.
It's not really in.
It's not really in here as
It's
specific numbers.
It's in the attachment,
attachment.
right? So,
Oh, okay.
Mr. Fike, what would you have to do in the attachment?
Yeah, it would just have to be clear what we're actually, you know, what you're actually voting on, what the numbers actually are.
Right now, I had a 1.9% increase, which is way below the 4%. You'd have to basically tell me it's be a 1.754% increase, and I'll adjust the PD 2028, the state forms, to show that.
Okay. Like, should Hunter like reread the motion and add in the language saying that with the adjustment of. Okay.
Now, let's let Mr. Lockinger advise.
All right.
I mean, unless you're willing to amend your, you know, unless you're willing to change your original motion, we could go that way.
I move that we approve the general fund budget as we've just discussed with the change that Allison suggested. Yeah.
To be
That's
1.754%.
That's cheating, but yeah.
Second,
Any discussion?
I have a question. I seem to remember last year, this is just my second year here, that we had maybe it was a pie chart or a bar chart on the parts of the budget that are mandated, costs that we can't do anything about. And I don't see that here. Can we add that not only for our edification, but for the public's edification?
There were pie charts in the preliminary budget on April the 6th that broke out the different portions of that. I don't know if it's specified. I don't remember, Mr. Fike, what portions were. So much of the budget is debt service and then contracts. Is that what you're speaking about? Things that are immutable?
Things that are mandated by the state that we really can't do
State
anything
and federal, the special education program.
Yeah, that there you go.
Yeah, that's broken out in the pie chart on the whole. Let's see.
We can, as part of posting this budget presentation along with the PDE forms and Mr. Fike's glossary, add those pie charts from April 4th back into this presentation.
That'd
so
be
they'd
great.
available.
Thank you. Thank you.
If I can say really quick that I fully respect all the work that Brian's done with the budget. I appreciate everything. I'm just not comfortable yet adding any increase to the taxes, so that's why I'll be saying no to this.
Okay. Any other discussion? Okay. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed?
No.
Any abstentions? Okay. Motion carries.
It is recommended that the Board of School Directors approve the following arrangements to purchase FY 2020-2021 transportation vehicles. And I think that I'll remove, okay, let me further emphasize that that's for one Thomas 28-passenger wheelchair bus diesel, $100,579 net trade. Bus number 52, the bus will be purchased through Roarer. And I'll do the second one later. Or the first one on the agenda.
Okay. There is a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion?
Yeah, I'd like to, could we clarify that again? What is this particular vehicle?
So this is just the wheelchair school bus. This is not the two 77-passenger ones, because I suspected that there might be some discussion around the use of propane vehicles instead of these diesel ones.
Okay. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries.
It is recommended that the Board of School Directors approves the following arrangements to purchase FY 2020-2021 transportation vehicles. 2 Bluebird 77-passenger school buses, diesel 175,616, net after trade, vehicles number 38 and 47. The buses will be purchased through Brightville.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, there's a motion and a second. Any discussion?
Yeah, I'd like to just comment about and express my concerns about investment in a diesel vehicle. One of the things that I think we've tried to do in kind of past purchases is try to think a little bit more about the impact of a diesel vehicle on on other aspects of our school community. One thing we know about, there's several things we know about diesel fuels, and I have shared, I don't know how many of you saw it, an article, that kind of described other districts and their considerations in terms of moving to propane as opposed to diesel vehicles because of some of the benefits that they really see. Certainly, there are some important benefits associated with costs and lower maintenance and operations, but probably more importantly, from my perspective, is the health impact of diesel versus propane. Diesel does contain a lot of bad outcomes, in terms of its emissions. Carbon monoxide, nitrogen oxide, hydrocarbons, and particulate matter. And these are things that really do have an impact upon our community in terms of the health of our students and our general public. We do know that about 20% or more of our students suffer from asthma, and it's that particulate in our transportation fuels, such as diesel, that contributes to that. So I think, considering, that we always, I think, try to make decisions that are in the best interest of students, I'm very concerned, about continuing to invest in diesel when we don't have to. There are also other considerations. I mean, propane fuel right now is running about half the cost of diesel, and certainly maintenance costs are a lot less. I mean, there are 25 quarts of oil that go into a regular oil change for diesel, and only 7 quarts, for propane. That's a third less. So significant maintenance savings. The other thing is, I mean, if you ever have a chance to kind of ride on a propane vehicle or experience it, you can see it's a quieter ride, and it's one of these. It's a vehicle that starts up even in the most bitter cold of days. So with diesel, a lot of times our staff has to come in early. They have to kind of plug things in and kind of make it work. So with diesel, it starts right up, and there's no need to kind of worry about startups on bitter cold days. The other thing that I see is that this is sort of a transitional phase for us. I don't know about you guys, but I've heard an awful lot about the movement to electric vehicles, and the Ford F-150 now has come out with an electric vehicle that is really supposed to be, I think, going to lead the vanguard probably, in terms of a whole evolution and whole change in how we transport, primarily because of the impacts, I think, of climate change and the greenhouse gas emissions that are associated with any fossil fuel. Propane does have reduced, fossil fuel or greenhouse gas impact, but it's still a fossil fuel in the long run, and ultimately it sounds like we'll have to move away from that. So my argument is that, instead of approving a diesel vehicle, I think there is about a $4,500 difference between that based upon the bids, between the diesel and the propane. I'd like to suggest or recommend that we amend the motion and consider the propane vehicle option as opposed to the diesel. That would change the cost, but I think you can see where that cost is in the bid document that is provided for us. So that change would be from 175,660 to 184,850. So that's my suggestion, recommendations, for amending this motion. But I hope I can get the board to support, that argument.
If you propose that amendment, I'll second that.
So I'd like to propose, amending that.
Second.
Okay.
Mr. Fike, could you share why the administration chose to recommend the diesel buses?
Actually, they were looking to the future. They're looking at going to electric. I know our assistant down there has actually driven an electric bus and he couldn't believe the power they have. We feel that this coming year, with the infrastructure plan the federal government's proposing, it'll make electric buses affordable. Last year in November, I started to put in the grant application, which basically covers the difference between a diesel and electric bus. In November, which was supposed to close in December, but at the end of November, they called me up and said all the money's been allotted, stop filling out your application. I plan to do it again this year, so our transportation people would rather jump ahead, that was the main reason.
Well, can I ask another, question, Mr. Fike, which is, I guess maybe it was last year or the year before when we purchased vehicles, we went to a lease option as opposed to a purchase. And leasing would then give us an easier option to kind of not necessarily be committed to or own the vehicle. And when the change occurs, let's say we make a change to electric vehicles, we're not saddled with owning another vehicle. I would imagine we could eliminate a vehicle from our fleet a lot easier if it's leased than if it's owned. Is there some benefit to leasing, and should we even be considering purchasing at this point?
Well, leasing though increases our debt payments each year because the lease is considered a debt payment. Purchasing is a once and done. The problem, I'm not sure how the new infrastructure bill is going to come out, but the existing PA Drives grant that is going for that offset the cost, you basically have to have a diesel to destroy to get that grant. And I say destroy, they actually want to drill a hole right through the engine so there's no longer a diesel engine out there on replacement. I have a feeling that the federal government will do the same thing when they come out with the electric buses. They're not going to let you swap out a propane for an electric. They're going to want a diesel engine. That's sort of like a cash to clunkers type thing to get off the road. So that's the only reason.
Well, I know we have plenty of diesel.
We do have plenty of diesel. Yeah.
To destroy.
We only have two propane. So
yeah.
We're looking at like a 12-year cycle to replace everything. If the government comes out, I think the last time I saw the bill, they're looking to eliminate 20% of the diesel engines in the transportation sector, not in the private sector, but in the transportation sector. So, I mean, that would be a big shot because right now it's about 150% of the cost of diesel for an electric. And that's what the PA Drive grant would have paid for the difference between the electric and the diesel to set up your charging and to purchase the bus.
Okay, any other discussion?
I think this is a good idea. Yeah, I don't know what else to say about it. I mean, for the cost difference, less than $10,000 for both vehicles. We know they're more fuel efficient, less maintenance. Over the lifetime of what those costs will be over what you're going to do in maintenance costs and fuel costs, I think we can save that money easily.
Okay. There's a motion and a second.
And hang on, technically speaking, since the original motion was seconded and then amended, the first vote you're taking now is actually whether you're going to allow the amendment to take place. Does that
Okay.
make sense? And
So
then
yes,
if that passes, then you'll vote on, well, depending on what it does, you'll vote on
Okay.
either the original motion or the amended motion.
Okay, so we're just voting to amend right now.
Correct.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
No.
Okay.
Motion carries.
The amendment. Yeah.
Amendment carries.
Right, and so now you're voting on the amended motion.
Okay.
Call the question.
All right, so there's a motion on the table to purchase two
Propane.
propane
At
passengers
184, 850.
at 184,
850.
850. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say no. No. Motion.
Can I have the yeas and nays?
6-3?
He's asking for just a roll call, so we have the.
Sure.
Hunter Ahrens,
Aye.
John Fiddler,
Aye.
Dr. Ann Herring,
No.
Dr. David Hemberger,
Aye.
Michael Japina,
No.
Dr. Sharon McClendon,
Yes.
Huey Miller,
Aye.
Michelle Stratton,
Aye.
Allison Wilson,
No.
6-3, motion carries.
Okay, moving on to letter E.
Real quick, I do want to do, because I'm going to shift gears a lot here. For business function, for Finance Facilities and Audit Committee, I've asked Allison to put on the committee of the whole agenda discussion about the firefighter tax credit, and I'll also be sending one for the LERTA that we talked about at our previous committee meeting. With that being said, also knock out my Township Borough Liaison, which is that the Planning Commission approved our request for some of the exceptions that were approved at the previous Planning Commission meeting that we needed in order to go out for architectural plans that we were thinking about. Which brings me to letter E. It is recommended that the Board of School Directors approve authorization for the business administrator to proceed with architectural plans and request bids for reconstruction of the Kerr Road Transportation Facility.
Is there a second?
Second.
Brian, would you mind elaborating on what happened at the Planning Commission meeting to give it some more detail? And I know that this wasn't on our previous agenda, so I'm sure that there will be some more discussion about what the implication of this is, and I'm wondering if you could give a brief opener for that too.
I can say they voted unanimously for a plan. They liked the plan. They, like the idea that we're using the same facility. We're addressing we didn't have to address the storm water, but we're actually adding a little bit more green space that was there. And we're actually decreasing the size of the building about 500 square feet. The only stipulations they had that would be on any other plans would be meeting their lighting code, meeting the outside lights around the building. I'm trying to think what the other one was. Oh, meeting the fire code and getting the MPDS permit, which you have to get anyway whenever you disturb soil on a property. They actually sent it to the township supervisors. The supervisors will adopt it or just formally accept their plan on June 8th. What I'm looking for now, as I told you before, once the Planning Commission gives us the go-ahead, I like to get the architectural plans out there. I like to get out the bid. And hopefully in August, September, come back to the board for the board to accept or reject the bids. And that would be if they accept them, go to construction, knock on wood, October, and get it under roof before the winter sets in.
So just so I understand it, the implication of our vote tonight will be to formalize, to have our currently servicing architects draft full plans that we could use to go out to bid. Is that correct? Okay.
Correct.
And then in fact to go out to bid.
And in fact, put out for bid, and I'll come back to the board the next time with the bids. You know.
Okay.
Right now, the estimate's at 1.5 million.
Which we already approved in the capital budget.
Correct.
So
Mr.
that
Pike,
money, we already have the money.
I have a question. Does this plan include any adaptations for potential electric vehicle charging? I think there's some underground networks that need to be in place. Is it?
What I'm planning on doing is put it in the plans as an alternate, unless the board wants me to put it in as straight out. The parking lot gets repaved. So before the parking lot gets repaved, run conduit underground to every single bus station so we could have the ability to set up charging stations. All we'd have to do is pull the wire through the conduit. I think it's a prudent thing to do is put the conduit in now for the future that we do have the ability to charge buses for electric.
Any sense what that would do to the overall cost? I mean, is that a major cost factor?
When they're doing that, you're probably talking $20,000 or $30,000. Just which
Okay.
to me, it's worth it to do it now than to have to dig up or run poles.
Okay, any other discussion? All right. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed?
No.
Any abstentions? Motion carries 8-1.
I'm all done.
Thank you, Mr. Ahrens. Moving on to Policy Committee, Dr. Hamburger.
Thank you, Mrs. Wilson. It's recommended the Board of Directors approve the items listed on the policies listed on the agenda for first and second reading.
Second.
Any discussion?
I had one question for Mrs. Harris, which is a follow-up to my question from last time. Whether anything in the language of 137.1 would restrict students from being able to participate in any of the music programs.
Okay. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Any abstention? Motion carries. Okay, that ends our voting for this evening. Moving on to the Athletics and Extracurricular Activities Committee, Dr. Herring.
Thank you, Allison. In spring sports, boys tennis qualified for the BCIAA team tournament. Baseball qualified for the BCIAA and District 3 tournament. They played tonight at 4:30. Did they win?
They did not.
Oh, sorry to hear that, but they did awesome otherwise. Softball qualified for the BCIAA and District 3 tournament. They will be playing tomorrow night at 4:30 at Northern York. Boys lacrosse qualified for BCIAA and District 3 tournament. Boys lacrosse won a District 3 playoff game for the second time in program history. Track and field had 17 student athletes qualify for the District 3 Track and Field Championships in Shippensburg this past week. And we had 3 student athletes qualify for the PIAA State Championships this weekend at Shippensburg. Boys volleyball won the Berks County Championship, defeating Wilson 3-0 on Wilson's home court. This is the program's 12th Berks County Championship. They also qualified for the District 3 tournament. Mr. Legath will be emailing all parents information for fall 2021 sports by the beginning of June. And lastly, I would like to highlight an Exeter organization called Exeter Music Association, also known as EMA. I think there's a misconception that EMA is a high school only organization, when in fact it is a K through 12 organization that supports every level of music education in our schools. This group of parents have provided xylophones and ukuleles for the general music classes K through 6, violins and cellos for our beginning string players, tubas for the senior high school band, and help organize a variety of events and trips for music groups at every level, as well as the baccalaureate for all seniors. Currently, we're looking for a few more interested parents to fill several simple committees to help our organization going and successful. We meet during the school year, typically the third Wednesday of the month in the band room at the high school, so please visit our Facebook page or our district website for more information. And that concludes my report. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Herring. Moving on to Equity and Excellence at Exeter Committee, Dr. McClendon.
Okay, thank you, Mrs. Wilson. The Equity Committee met earlier this month on May 2nd. We continue to work on our goals and also future planning of the committee. That concludes my report.
Okay, is that all, Dr. McClendon?
Oh, yeah, I said that concludes my
Oh,
report.
I'm sorry. Okay, we didn't hear that part. Sorry. Okay, then moving on to the ECEF, Mr. Miller.
So I only have two announcements from the ECEF. The ECEF received over $5,000 in teacher mini grant applications for the Exeter School District staff. Over the next week, they will notify the staff of who got selected for that project. So looking forward to that. They really have some good plans for that. And secondly, there is a golf tournament. I want to see if I can pull this up. For the Kathy Harris Memorial Scramble, and there's a registration coming up. Go online, you can actually see where the registration is. It's on Sunday, June the 6th at Willow Hollow Golf Course. 1 p.m. shotgun start, $75 per person. So definitely feel free to definitely register for that. It's, the money goes towards the memorial fund. So those basically are the two things that I have for the ECF.
Thank you very much, Mr. Miller. And then moving on to BCTC, Mr. Fiddler.
Nothing beyond what you received after the last meeting, and the next meeting is this coming Wednesday night. That's it.
Thank you. Dr. Humber, you've got two in a row, BCIU and Legislative Liaison.
Okay, I'll start off with the BCIU board meeting. We had last Thursday. It's our regular May meeting. In addition to the regular business, items, the board heard a presentation on the IU's target advocacy campaign related to special education funding. So they published a video, and I think the intended audience will ultimately be our state legislators. But the video kind of featured a visually impaired student who is from the Antietam School District, attends a program at Wilson, and is heavily supported, with her visual impairment, heavily supported by assistive technology. She has a smart brailer, specialized Chromebook, a braille printer, and personalized attention from a personal instructor, occupational therapist, and support to the family. So it was really kind of, I think what it was trying to do was to kind of dramatize for the benefit of our state legislators who really have to think carefully about how they're funding special education, how expensive special education can be, and assistive technologies and uniquely disabled students like this are more and more the case, and their IEPs are very intricate and require a lot of support and are very costly, and more needs to be done to help school districts bear those burdens of cost. And then the final thing I want to say about the BCIU board meeting was that there was a recognition that there's the end of tenure for several board members. Board members serve a 3-year term. There will be an election, for re-election for those folks to get back onto the IU board or newly elected. So all county board members are asked to vote online. Usually we have a kind of a get-together, an annual conference or convention where board members get together, which is always a fun event. This year, but obviously because of COVID, that didn't happen. So instead of doing that, they're asking you, and I think you've all received the email, hopefully, from Donna Napoli to make that vote. So please do that by June 11th. And that's all for my BCIU report. In terms of the legislative liaison, role, I did attend a special press conference with Governor Wolf, and it was last Wednesday. It was at Pottstown High School. It was very hot right outside. It was very, very well attended, though, by legislators, school superintendents, and of course Governor Wolf and his staff. And the focus was really on the cyber charter law that we currently have. It's a 24-year-old law that has never worked well. This year, that law, which outlines how cyber charter and charter schools are funded, that law will cost the local school districts $3 billion this year. So Governor Wolf called this among the worst in the nation, this cyber charter law, and the speakers who followed him and the discussion that came after that really spoke about the failure of the state, about the lack of transparency and lack of accountability under the current system. Sort of most outrageous are the costs associated with the online or cyber school programs, which is one of the biggest drivers of our school property taxes. And we should want to make sure that we really kind of emphasize that whenever we can. One of the things they emphasize was this is not about school choice. There is a place for virtual education, but it's about the fundamental flaws within the funding formula. It's just fundamentally unfair. So what they were talking about as well is House Bill 272. One of the sponsors of that bill was there, Joe Cresci from Montgomery County. He was a legislator who spoke very strongly about it, a former board member, and school board member. And so that particular legislation would establish a standard cost for cyber school tuition. Right now, we pay a different fee than the district down the road. There's no obvious reason for that, other than the funding formula is really based upon our expenses. So we may be charged $12,000. The school district down the road might be charged, $9,000, for the same services and the same student. 400 of the 500 school districts in Pennsylvania have now passed the resolution, including Exeter, have passed the resolution for charter school funding reform. So there does appear to be a lot of momentum at this point right now, and there even appears to be some level of bipartisan support, or at least the foundation for support at the state level. And that's, that's been the big hang-up. It hasn't been bipartisan, but it appears as if we're getting there. As a follow-up to that, I just want to announce, too, that tomorrow at 9:30, PSBA has organized a charter reform virtual rally. So any board member is welcome to attend that. If you jump on tonight, if you jump on the PSBA website and register for that, you can attend that tomorrow as well. It's about an hour long. It's really to send a clear message to our General Assembly that now is the time for charter school reform. And this is to build on the momentum to push that legislation that ties funding to the actual costs to educate children enrolled in a charter school and to make the much needed changes. So there'll be speakers, updates, and tools that we can use to reach out to our legislators. So I hope I'll be participating tomorrow, but I hope some other folks can join as well. And that's all from my report, Mrs. Wilson.
I have a question. Dave, is there a date for a vote by the legislature on?
I'm not even sure if this bill is out of committee yet.
Oh, okay.
John. So it's kind of hard
So we're
to say.
still-
This is a minority. It's proposed from the minority party.
Yeah.
So that tends to kind of get lost in the sauce there in Harrisburg right now, considering Harrisburg's not the easiest place to get legislation through at this point right now if you're in the minority party.
Are you in a position to put any odds on this?
Well, Governor Wolf actually included the same information or the same recommendations in his budget. So if the legislature can approve his budget, that would go a long way. His budget actually includes a reduction in charter school costs so that every school district would pay $9,500 per student, and then have a tiered system for, like a 4-tier system for special education, which would control costs as well. We would save probably hundreds of thousands of dollars if that would go through. So we're trying to make that point to our legislators. The best way to make it to go through is to contact your local legislator, to ask your legislator support House Bill 272 when it comes up for a vote, or to at least consider options to maybe follow through with the governor's recommendations for his budget, so that we can have some reductions and some cost reductions for school districts across the state.
Okay, thank you very much. All right, and Hunter, you're done? Okay. Is there any board member that would like to be heard at this time?
Yes, I just have a question. I'll probably direct it to either Brian or to Dr. Minor. It has to do PSERS, which is the retirement fund for people in public education, has been in the news a lot lately related to overstating their investment performance. There's also been a boatload of subpoenas that have been delivered to Harrisburg as part of an ongoing federal investigation. So I'm not so much looking to figure out what's going on with the federal investigation. I'm sure the FBI will take care of that. I'm just looking to see if, Brian, if you're aware of any impact on the taxpayers or anything that would impact contributions from teachers due to the overstatement of the investment performance.
Okay, there would be no impact to taxpayers, but PSERS did send out notice that as of July 1st, certain groups, the employee contribution will go up 0.5%. I think that's going to be challenged in court because the law states they have to give that information back in November. They already did. They certified it, but then they came back and changed it because of this investigation. Now, that doesn't mean the legislator will change the law so they can do that, but it's not going to affect the districts. It's going to affect the employees, and mainly the employees that started after 2012. In the pension plan or plan the state fixed, they said they fixed it. It's going to take 20 years to fix it, but their contribution by employees can go up 0.5% a year, and that's what they said will happen in July 1st. Okay.
So can you get, as this evolves, I mean, as we know, PSERS has wreaked havoc on our budgets over the last 8 or 10 years. So we could just keep an eye on that. It's a $62 billion fund, and if there's any implications coming down the line, if you guys could just keep us clued in on that. I'm sure PSBA is on top of it, but it'd be nice to hear from you guys.
Will do.
Thanks.
Yeah, I think didn't the AFT recommend firing all of the board of directors except the 2 that were most recently put on there? So it's really a big issue. It's kind of scary too when you consider how many billions of dollars and how many members rely upon that, for their retirement needs. Yeah. Mrs. Wilson, are we going to hear the township liaison report, or did we already do that?
I did that with her.
Okay. I was sleeping during that time, Hunter. I apologize.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I try to keep them together. I tend to prattle on, so I wanted to avoid that.
I have a quick question, if I may. It was brought up earlier that the attestation expires May 31st. Could Dr. Minor explain what that means, what that means overall?
Sure, I'd be happy to. So the attestation order, if you remember, had to be signed by school districts in order for them to return to in-person learning while their counties were in substantial, and it committed districts to close schools, do contact tracing, et cetera, if cases of COVID-19 reached a certain level, as well as abide by whatever the Department of Health mask mandates were for school districts. That also would, so it expires by design, by the PDE and the Department of Health on May 31st. It also expires automatically when a county is in moderate for 2 weeks in a row, which is actually a position that Berks County is about to be in. The portion that refers to having to close schools, I should say. So the mask mandate portion of the attestation order is subject to change and revision by the Pennsylvania Department of Health. And as you know, they've revised these things multiple times. So we are at this point kind of watching and waiting what happens in the next few days. The information has been coming in, in some days in multiple different statements by the Department of Health and the Department of Education in the same day. So what they will say between now and a week from now when it becomes June 1st is hard to say. We do anticipate as a district that after June the 4th, we will not be providing dashboard information over the summer, that sort of thing. In terms of what will look, some people have questioned, what will the fall look like? We're planning for, I'm going to say an air quote, normal school year. I think we've all learned at this point, going through this entire year that between now and August, the end of August, is forever in the world of what the Department of Health, the CDC, PDE, et cetera, devises. But we continue to be committed as a district to making sure that we're following and complying with all laws, rules, regulations, and mandates as we are required to do as a government extension, and doing what we believe is in the best interest in the safety and health of our students, staff, and our community. So we don't have anything that is on the board agenda this evening in terms of our changes. One of the things, we were thinking about amending our health and safety plan, and that, at this meeting, and then the state came out and said that we would have to have new health and safety plans submitted to PDE by July 1 to open for the 2021-2022 school year. So, it's a constantly changing and evolving landscape. And should we make any changes in our procedures that would impact students directly, we would let, obviously, the school board know. And of course, the change date of June the 1st, we have a full day of school on June the 1st, June the 2nd, and then the 3rd and 4th are half days, and then we're done for the school year, regardless. And so it's not, it's not this tremendous amount of time in terms of restructuring our health and safety plan, et cetera. So if we make any significant changes or we're notified that we need to, we will certainly let you know and the community know as far as students go. But at this point, we're looking at very few days left on the calendar to have students, and we'll keep you apprised.
But with that said, we do have a summer program going on.
We do, and we haven't started. It's not going on at this point. It will be going on. So we don't anticipate that we would have to abide by any kind of attestation order as it pertains to the summer programming in terms of closing school, that sort of thing, with a certain number of case counts that's dictated. Although, again, who knows if they would reinstate that. I mean, I really don't want to say with any level of certainty what the state will do between now and then. We don't anticipate that will happen. As to whether or not, students and staff members will be required to wear masks between now and the first week of camp, that's at the end of June. Again, I feel like that it's too many weeks out to say with any degree of certainty what will be out there in the landscape, other than the fact that, again, we're committed to following, all of the mandates, laws, rules, regulations, et cetera, and doing, what we can do to ensure health and safety. A lot of our programming will be outside. We think there's a lot of things in that regard. We do continue to work with the county. They reached out to us at the health department to continue to support vaccination efforts. We've seen a tremendous drop in our staff COVID numbers since mass vaccination. So, again, at this point, I don't feel like there's anything that we can say with any degree of certainty that will happen between now and the start of camp, now and the start of the next school year, et cetera.
And just to confirm, you said that camp starts the end of June?
Let me look at my calendar. I need to look for the exact first date. The first day of the Tips and Talents camp is June the 21st.
And you said the majority of that program is outdoors.
A great deal of it. So we're, partnering with Tips. That's outside. We are looking at, we're using the Orton Creek spaces, those sorts of things. There will be certainly indoor. We, again, it's weather and heat dependent. We want to use an air conditioned building, that sort of thing. But Orton is a very large building. We have about 300 students in the program, so there's plenty of space to spread out internally as well. You're welcome.
So with the attestation expiring today because we are in moderate, I believe, or tomorrow maybe, when they'll make the announcement.
Yeah, they haven't made the announcement yet, so I'm not exactly sure. I don't know if Mr. Lockinger knows exactly when they make that. But typically, we get some kind of notification regarding that.
But if we did do that, we wouldn't have to close our schools anymore for these last 2 weeks. Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct. So there wouldn't be a threshold that we would be required to close, or for a certain period of time that we would be required to close.
Okay. All right. Anyone else?
Just a quick thing. I just want to congratulate. Well, the next time we have a meeting, the seniors are going to be graduating. So I want to congratulate all the seniors for all their hard work this year, having to deal with their second year of COVID, basically. So wanted to make sure that they get recognized. And I tell you, it's going to be a good thing that they're going to have a graduation outside this year and some other things as well. So I don't know if it's too late or not for the Adopt a Senior thing. I haven't checked lately, but if there are, definitely take advantage of that. It's a really good program. I think I adopted 2 kids, so it was pretty expensive. But other than that, I just wanted to thank everybody for those people that did participate in the Adopt a Senior program. It was definitely, the kids were helpful. They were very happy to have it. The one for my daughter, I think the girl made like a TikTok video of all the, I don't know, I don't get all into this stuff, but it's still a great program, and I'm looking forward to seniors graduating about 5-6 days, I guess, from now. So looking forward to that. So congrats to them.
Thank you. Okay. If there is no objection, I will adjourn this meeting. Hearing no objections, this meeting is adjourned.